Hello, in today's video we're going to talk about how to build an army for Age of Sigmar 4th edition. So, as you might have seen, there's a new edition of Age of Sigmar. I know this is a channel that mainly talks about Kill Team, and most Kill Team players, who is a game in the 41st millennium involving a relatively small number of models, perhaps not natural fertile ground for people wanting to play Age of Sigmar, right? Which is a fantasy game with potentially huge numbers of models, unless you play giants, right? But I really like talking about list building, right? I've talked about this before. Quite often my relationship with the game is I buy the game, I study the list building part of the rules, I build and paint citadel miniatures, and that's as far as it goes. And then I have an army that I could use in that game. So whether or not I ever play any Age of Sigmar, that's still up for debate, but I have certainly learned, studied, read up on list building. So let's talk about that. The rules for army building in Games of Age of Sigmar are actually very different to anything else I've seen previously from Games Workshop. Games Workshop's gone through a number of eras, I would say, with list building. If you want to zoom all the way out, and my 40k Sisters of Battle building a list in 2nd edition retrospective is quite good for this. But if you want to zoom all the way out, at one point, units were categorized by type. So you had, heroes, whether they were then divided into lords and heroes, and you had, your more elite units and your more basic units. And generally speaking, originally things were divided by a percentage. So you had a limit of a percentage for all the categories except for the sort of basic troop, line, unit, whatever they were called, where you're given a minimum percentage of things from that category that you have to take, right? And then we moved away from that, and certainly for 40k, I'm trying to remember how Warhammer, I genuinely can't remember. I don't think Warhammer ever had this system, right? For 40k, we went into the, what's it called? It's gone from my brain. But force organization charts, right? So you have 2 HQ, 3 troops, 6 troops, 3 elite, whatever it was. And then that was tweaked over the years. I don't think Warhammer Fantasy ever had that, right? And then, of course, when Age of Sigmar launched, they've been a bit weird about the... originally it didn't launch with any list building, and it would just take all your models. And I've not been... a massive follower of Age of Sigmar, but certainly this, I have tried to build lists in it before, certainly this all feels very different to what I'm used to from Games Workshop. So if you're more of a diehard Age of Sigmar guy, maybe you can see the historical, lineage of this from the previous couple of editions, and you can see, they were always kind of moving towards this idea. But this is, to me, this all seems quite new and quite interesting, so I thought I'd go into it partially to educate you and partially to cement it in my own brain, because of course teaching something to somebody else helps you to remember it. That's well known. So it has a stage of a set of steps that you must go through, some of which seem really self-explanatory but have weird little wrinkles in them. So you agree a points limit, you pick a faction and battle formation, you form your regiments, you add your auxiliaries and faction terrain, then you add enhancements, okay, and then you pick your laws. So we're going to deal with each of these in turn. So first off, agree points limit. Now, this sounds really straightforward, right? Anyone that's played any Games Workshop game knows, okay, yeah, we're going to play 1,000 points, we're going to play 2,000 points, whatever it is, and then off you go. There is some nuance to this that I think. The core rulebook really strongly suggests that the only valid numbers of points to play at are 1,000 points and 2,000 points. Okay, and that's it. It is worth saying, and you'll see this as we get into the way you build your armies. If you're someone that loves to play really big games, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 points, you're going to run into problems with army creation, because the rules as written, there is a hard cap on the number of units that you can have. You can never have more than 21 things in your army, and that includes your heroes, right? Rules as written. So that's worth bearing in mind. And then the other thing is that you can have a free command point in the first battle round if your army is 50 or more points lower than the limit, right? So effectively, you can buy a single command point in the first battle round for 50 points. It doesn't quite say that, but that's what it means. Now, I don't play enough Age of Sigmar to know if that's worth it, or if that's more of a, well, you couldn't spend your point, because there's even less granular points in this than 40k 10th edition. So if the lack of being able to pay 8 points for a set of car keys was boiling your biscuits in 40k, this is even worse, because this doesn't have points based upgrades at all of any kind, right? So it could be that you're stuck without spending 50 points. So I can't work out whether it's something you'd want to deliberately do, and in effect, like, say, well, I've got to build a list that's like as close to 1950 as possible, but not a hair over, or whether it's a sort of pat on the head for people that's like, oh, you couldn't spend your last 53 points, well, at least you get a command point, and you're like, thanks, game, right? People with more expertise about the system will be able to explain which way we fall on that, but it's definitely worth pointing out, right? So you pick your faction, and then you pick your battle formation. So picking your faction is really straightforward. You pick the army that you want to take, right? So I want to play, and you'll see this all the way through this video, I play Soulblight Gravelords. That is the Age of Sigmar army that I have. So we're going to play Soulblight Gravelords. And then your battle formation is kind of like your sub-faction, or your formation from 40k, but it's much, much less of a big deal in 40k. In Age of Sigmar, your battle formation is really only giving you a special rule. It's not dictating anything else. So it's not, it's in, because in 40k it is your battle formation, your formation, I should say, that gives you like access to your different things that you can do with your command points. That's not the case here. So let's have a look. So here are the battle formations available to the Soulblight Gravelords. So for example, Legion of Sheesh. And effectively, it's just, you can pick one additional target when using the Deathly Invocation ability. So, to explain, Deathly Invocation is the faction ability for the Soulblight Gravelords, which they can use to resurrect some skeletons or zombies or whatever they want, right? And I don't know why my camera here is utterly misbehaving and going over the text. And now you've all seen the forbidden orange box. Just really pause this and fix it, like, not while recording the video, but it's annoying me. There you go. So, yeah. The Deathly Invocation is the faction ability, and then this is just saying that you can use that faction ability twice. Okay? And again, so we've got a Bacchanal of Blood, right? Which is just add 1 to casting rolls for vampire units not in combat, and add 1 to wound rolls for combat attacks made by friendly vampire units that are charged in the same turn. So again, it is a buff, right? And it encourages you to build an army in a certain way. And you can see how it's very similar to the kind of army rules in the formations for 40k. But what it isn't doing is opening up and this is all of your war gear, and these are the stratagems that you're going to use. It doesn't do that, so it's just the special rule, right? So you choose one of these 4 special rules, and what I like is that unlike in 40k, where we only got one, we got like the default one. So if this was going to follow the same thing as 40k, you'd basically just get Legion of Sheesh, like that's the one that buffs everything. Whereas this is like, cool, you can have a generic one, Legion of Sheesh, you can have Bacchanal of Blood, which is all about vampires, you can have Death March, which is all about skeletons, or you can have the Death Sense Drove, which is all about zombies, right? Now, for me, I actually think Legion of Sheesh, I like skeletons, but I think the Death March one is pretty poor. I quite like Legion of Sheesh, as I think that's cool. And I think even if quite a few skeletons, you also probably should have quite a few vampires. So the other one that I'm kind of looking at is Bacchanal of Blood. I think those top 2 are cooler from my admittedly limited understanding of the game. But yeah, that's your battle formation. So then you've got to form your regiments. So you can have 1 to 5 regiments, right? It's a hard cap. That's not like... It would make more sense, wouldn't it, if it was like 3 regiments for 1,000 points. Then the system might scale. But no, it's 1 to 5 regiments. Each regiment has 1 hero, so you have therefore a soft cap essentially of 5 heroes in your entire army. I say a soft cap because, as we'll see, There are various different ways for certain armies to get extra heroes in regiments as units. Like, there are little exceptions to the rule. Each regiment has 0 to 3 non-hero units in it, and your general's regiment can have up to 4 units in it. Now, I have seen online, I'm not actually totally sure why, that something to do with some of the scenarios in the General's Handbook imply that you don't necessarily want your general's regiment to be really big, but maybe they give away extra points or something, I don't know. But that's something else to bear in mind. Do double check the rules to see if they interact with these in other ways. But in general, this is how you're forming your regiments. So let's have a look at how that works in practice. So this is the entire points document for the Soulblight Gravelord. So I'm just going to get my laser pointer so I can explain what I'm doing here, right? So you can see here, for example, if you take Radakar the Wolf, right? The villain from Cursed City, as one of your characters. So in his regiment, you can take any Soulblight Gravelord unit. So he can have 4, right? Because he'd be your general, Soulblight Gravelord units. And he also can take 0 to 1 Vikos Retainer. So you'll see that some of these characters here have this hero can join an eligible regiment as a Vikos Retainer. So you could take one of these smaller characters from Cursed City, like Gorslav the Gravekeeper. He can be in one of the unit slots for Radakar the Beast. And so some of the other, like, I've had a look at the Seraphon list as well, because Mrs. TI is going to play Seraphon, and they have something similar for their Slan. The Slan can have a favoured spawning, which means that you can take a hero in a regiment led by a Slan, right? So we got this special rule to let us load up on characters if you wanted to do that very sort of Cursed City themed heavy list, right? Now, the Soulblight Gravelord's army list is pretty permissive. You'll see for the vast majority of characters, the regiments can take any Soulblight Gravelord's unit. There are some limits, so you've got Watch Captain Helgrim, the White King, and the White King on Skeletal Steed. If you take those as heroes, they can only take Death Rattle units in their regiments, right? And Gorslav up here can only take Deadwalkers in his, right? And Iravolga can only take Direwolves and Fellbats, so really quite restrictive. I think if you wanted to bring her in because you like her rules, you'd be maybe looking to make use of the Vikos Retainer to avoid having to bring in these things. And the Mortis Engine can only have Deadwalkers as well. So there are some limits. And again, I will say Soulblight's quite permissive. So if you think about the Seraphon, they have quite a hard and fast rule that basically Skink heroes can only have Skinks in their regiments, and Slan heroes can Saurus heroes can only have Saurus in their regiments, and it's only the Slan that can take a mixture of Skinks and Sauruses. And you may find that with other armies as well. So just be aware of that. Like the heroes that you take can potentially limit the units that you can take in your army. Okay. Yeah. So then we add. I have already done that slide, haven't I? I've just made a little mistake. So, auxiliaries and faction terrain. So you can actually have as many other units as you want that don't fit in regiments, okay? And they count as auxiliary units. But if you have more auxiliary units than your opponent gets an extra command point in each battle round. I'm, like I said, not an Age of Sigmar expert, but even I know enough to know that getting a command point every single battle round is probably quite good. So I really think you want to avoid taking auxiliary units wherever possible, right? And it should be pretty easy to avoid as long as you're playing at 2,000 points. Obviously, once you get, if you're like, yeah, we're going to play a 5,000 point apocalypse-sized game like on the floor of a sports centre, you're going to have a think in a house rule. Do you want everyone to be taking loads of auxiliary units, or do you want to say you can have 10 regiments instead of 5, or whatever it might be? But yeah, so basically what this allows you to do is you really want to load up on heroes and play Hero Hammer, you can. You'll just be giving away that command point each battle round, okay? Now, the next thing is faction terrain. So if your army list has faction terrain, you get to field one faction terrain for free. right? So let's have a look at what that looks like. So in the Soulblight Gravelords, they have no faction terrain. So I neither get to nor have to have a piece of faction terrain. Okay, but the Seraphon do. So let's look at this. So the Seraphon can get this thing called the Realm Shaper engine. Okay, so it has, obviously it has health and it has a save, so it can be destroyed, right? It has this rule here, Fierce Guardians. So it adds 1 to the hit rolls for the combat attacks made by friendly Saurus or Kroxigor units that target an enemy unit while it's within 9 of the terrain feature. Okay, and then in your hero phase, if there are any Seraphon wizards within 3 of the terrain feature, pick another terrain feature within 24 of this terrain feature, and 3 enemy units in 3 inches of that terrain to be the target, and then you can roll d3, and on a 2-up you inflict mortal damage on the target equal to the roll. If the terrain feature has health, inflict d3 mortal damage on it. So it's not nothing in terms of power level. So what this means is if you're playing Seraphon, a Seraphon army, even only 1,000 points, you need to go out and buy one of these £42.50 Realm Shaper engines and cart it round with you to every game. And I don't know how to feel about that, right? Because it's kind of a dumb-looking giant pyramid that you have to take to every single game and plonk down on the table, because it's pretty cool and it doesn't cost any points. I actually end up feeling relieved that my army doesn't have faction terrain, because it means that I don't have to buy paint and, crucially, transport to any game that I might want to go to my piece of faction terrain, which is, yeah, it's an odd decision to make. And it's interesting that they've gone the opposite way to 40k. 40k have gotten rid of a lot of the faction terrain, right? So, Sisters of Battle have that massive church with the statue. Wasn't in the game for that long. Not totally removed, but like Center Legends. And even where armies have retained the ability to buy faction terrain, they've deliberately made it aggressively crap. Whereas here in Age of Sigmar, they're like, no. We want people to be using their faction terrain every single game. The game's basically, and I have no doubt that when it comes time to get the Soulblight Gravelords army book for this edition, they'll probably go, here you go, here's your faction terrain, right? And the game's going to be balanced around everybody having their piece of faction terrain, which is, it's a choice. I just think, right, the terrain is literally the worst models Games Workshop make. They, for a lot of them, they outsource them to China. That's why the sprues are different. I just built the terrain from Scaventide today, right? Because I want to play some Spearhead at some point potentially, and there's so many more connection points on the sprue than you would normally get from a Games Workshop terrain kit, and the mold lines are thick and visible, and you have to go around and scrape them all, and it just doesn't feel like working with a Games Workshop plastic kit. Like, they're not that nice, right? And yet they're priced the same as GW stuff. It's not cheap at £42.50, so I don't know, something to be aware of, something that I find a little bit off-putting, personally. But, on the other hand, if you like your faction terrain and you already have it, it's free and you're actually going to get to use it, right? Which is a bonus. Try and be positive. Enhancements. So, in your army list, you will have a number of enhancements. These are like your relics and things, I guess, from 40k. Basically, you pick one free enhancement from each table. You can put all your enhancements on one character, but you can't put them on a unique character, so like a special character, basically. So it's a fair incentive to include at least one non-unique character, so you can pick up these free bonuses, basically, right? So then this is the enhancements example from the Soulblight Gravelords. So I have 2 enhancement tables, the Cursed Bloodlines, heroic traits there at the top, and the Deathly Heirlooms, the artifacts of power there at the bottom. And so essentially I get one of each for free. There's no points costs associated with these. I just get one thing from each for free and assign a non-unique hero to carry it, and the non-unique hero can be the same for both things. Now, this does mean these being free, rather than like 40k, where these kinds of things would have points associated with them. There's even less granular points, right? If you don't like the fact that 10th edition, I said this before, doesn't have granular points, like, they've taken away even this little bit. So they're just free things. You have them. You have to have them. even if you don't think they're that good, you're choosing the one that's like least bad and giving it to a character, right? Because it's there for free, all right? So that's your enhancements. And then we got to choose laws. So magic works massively differently from any way I ever remember magic working in Warhammer at all. So rather than having a wizard and being like, cool, this guy's my fire wizard, this guy's my death wizard, this guy's my nature wizard, whatever it might be, you're like, no, you're going to pick a spell law, and that affects your entire army. So every wizard in the army can cast spells from your spell law. Each spell can only be cast one time, so there's no point having more wizards than spells on your spell law, except that some wizards come with a spell on the datasheet, and some spells in your spell law note that they can break that rule and they can be cast by different wizards, I think, right? But it's a per army choice, and you've got 3 laws that you have to pick. So your spell law, your prayer law, and your manifestation law. So these are generally found in your army list. So the Soulblight Gravelords have, in their index anyway, 1 spell law, the Law of Undeath. So you pick that, job done, right? And the Soulblight Gravelords don't have any priests, so you don't have a prayer law to pick, and that's done. There are no generic prayer laws or generic spell laws. So gone are the days where you'd have generic spell laws like fire and heavens and dark and light and life and death, right? That's not a thing. You just have your army-specific spell law, which I feel like most of the time most people took the army-specific spell law, but, it's worth noting. But there are, so when it comes to the manifestation law, this is how endless spells work now. So I've been playing Age of Sigmar for a while. You're aware that the big thing that they launched, I think it was last edition of Age of Sigmar, or maybe in AOS 2. In AOS 2 or AOS 3, they launched this thing called Endless Spells, and everyone went out and bought them a line sorcery box which had all the different endless spells, and you could pay points for an individual endless spell, and it was basically that edition's version of something that this edition doesn't have, but it was that edition's version of the thing that you're like, what do you do when you have some points left over and then not enough points to spend on another unit or hero or something, right? And you could buy an endless spell and your wizard could cast the endless spell, and that was that. Now these days the endless spells do not cost points. So every army will have some endless spells. Now, if you're an army that has a box of endless spells that came out alongside your army, then congratulations, you can use that law. So get them, paint them up, and you can use them. But you can also use one of the laws from the generic list. Now, if, like, Soulblight Gravelords don't have... they don't have there's not a Soulblight Gravelord Endless Spells box. So, I mean, there is, it's called Forbidden Power, but it's one of the generic ones, more on that later. Yeah, and so you will use one of these generic laws. So let's go through those as well. So, the generic Endless Spell laws are available as a download from the website. It's funny, a lot of people were talking about these for a long time when Scaventide first came out, and I couldn't work out where they were, because it's taken them, you can see the date on this document only came up on the 15th, I think they're in the spiral-bound General's Handbook that you can physically buy separately, but they're not printed on the cards that you get in Scaventide that are General's Handbook cards that a lot of people say replicate all the information from General's Handbook, but they don't replicate the Endless Spells, which is why the Endless Spells have now been put online, I think, so you don't have to buy that spiral-bound General's Handbook to get the generic Endless Spells, but they are also in the app. Now, essentially, in your generic Endless Spells, you've got there are 6 generic spell laws. 4 of them carve up the endless spells from that original malign sorcery box into little groups. So, for example, you can see on the slide here, I have put the Morbid Conjuration Manifestation Law, which is the Purple Sun of Sheesh, okay, the Suffocating Gravetide, the Malevolent Maelstrom, and the Soul Share Shackles. So you'd pick this lore, and then all of your wizards would know all 4 of these endless spells. And then there are 3 other generic endless spell lores that are selections of the other things from the original Malign Sorcery box. So you can't mix and match with impunity, right? Now, the 3 endless spells that I've painted up ever, and therefore are the only ones I've considered using, will be the Purple Shun of Sheesh, the Suffocating Gravetide, but also something called a Prismatic Palisade, which isn't one of these 4. So if I wanted to use these, I'd have to find my Malevolent Maelstrom and Soul Snare Shackles and give them a little paint up. And this is I know nothing from the rules, but this is one of the 2 lores that seems undead themed, right? Because you've got the Gravetide, you've got the Purple Sun, things like that. The other ones they have, so I said there were 6 of those, 4 of them relate to the original Malign Sorcery box set. Then there was something released called Forbidden Power, which is very undead themed as well. Like there's a Nagash head, there's a cool little skeleton man in a rowboat, and then I think there's like a skeleton bridge. And so that is one as well that you can have instead of one of the ones that relates to the original Malign Sorcery box, or you can use the Kronspine by itself, which is that massive endless spell that you can buy. You can just have that for free in any army, but you only get the one rather than a choice of 4 or 5, right? So, unlike the faction terrain thing, I actually quite like this, because I think endless spells are cool, they make the game look cool, they don't, like... Yes, people are upset for the same reason as terrain, like, no, I have to buy this thing that I didn't want. Yeah, it's true. I just find them cooler, and I like that you're encouraged to actually use them, rather than before where a lot of people didn't use them because they were like, well, I'd rather use these points to buy more units because that's more efficient, right? So I think this is cool, and we should see more endless spells on the in play and being used, and that's pretty cool. I'm not quite sure which endless spells I'll be using if I play Age of Sigmar. Probably either Morbid Conjuration or, like I said, Forbidden Power. For no other reason than those are the 2 that look kind of death related. Probably I want to paint up Forbidden Power because I own it on Sprue, and the little boatman skeleton guy in his little boat made of skeletons with his little oar is just wicked cool. So maybe I'll get that, even though it probably isn't very good. It's pretty cool. And then we got about Regiments of Renown. So this wasn't in our original list. This is Regiments of Renown. So this is where allies have gone. And at the moment, there are 2 sources that I can find of Regiments of Renown, right? So there's the Dawnbringers Part 2 Regiments of Renown PDF, okay, which lists out some Regiments of Renown. And there's also some Regiments of Renown in the Sons of Behemat faction pack. So Sons of Behemat is the new IP-friendly name for Giants, okay? And one of the things with Giants is, ever since Giants were a thing, you could always take a Giant in other armies. And so finding the Regiments of Renown thing in the Giants pack is how you still do that. So you can still take a Giant. It is broken down, so like for the Death, you can only take a Gatebreaker Gargan, and for the Chaos, you can only take another kind of Gargan. Like, they're broken down into the specific kinds, and then, of course, Destruction armies can choose any of them, right? Now, it's worth saying a couple of things. 1, this takes up one of your 5 regiment slots, right? 2, you can only take 1 Regiment of Renown. And 3, like I said, it's the only way you can have any kind of allies. Now, apart from the Giants, which are kind of a special case, all of the other Regiments of Renown are... it's things from elsewhere in your Grand Alliance that can't be taken by their own army, but can be taken by the other armies in the Grand Alliance, if that makes sense, right? So let's go through another example just to explain what I mean. So the Leash's Hand, right, is a Regiment of Renown that I've picked out, and it would enable me to take, in my Soulblight Gravelord's army, Arcan the Black and 2 units of Morghasts, okay? Now, this is pretty fun because Arcan the Black, for those of you that don't know, there was a kit put out in the end times of Warhammer, Warhammer the Old World before they killed it off, that gave you either Arcan the Black or Nefaria or, what's her name? Or von Karstein, right? Manfred von Karstein. So it's like you built one of the giant kind of zombie dragon ghost filled things, and you could put one of these 3 really cool characters on it, and they were a kit for for that time for vampire counts, right? And the same with the Morghasts. They came out at the same time in the end times, and they were just a new thing for vampire count players. Now, those, like a lot of other things, those units got spun off, and all of the what are they called? The bone casts, right? The Ossiarch Bone Reapers. That's the one. Got spun off around these older models. So these are in effect the older models from the Ossiarch Bone Reaper range. But you can see that they were originally part of like a Combined Arms Undead army, because they have a lot of spirit stuff on them as well. Like around Archon the Black Space, you've got 3 spirits that would really be part of that spirit stuff was spun out to be the Nighthaunt stuff. So it is cool. I don't know if it's mechanically interesting for gameplay that much, just because and as you go through the document, which is freely available, the different things that you can add for Regiments of Renown are quite chunky. They're quite a big points investment. It's not just like in 40k where you go, oh, look, I'm going to add an Imperial Assassin for shits and giggles, but my army still feels like the army that it is. Now, there are some bits that are more like that for Order. I think you can use Gotrek Gunnarsson in any Order army as a Regiment of Renown. So he does take up one of your 5 regiment slots just for one naked dwarf, but you can do that. And that, to me, that's a lot cooler. And the Callus and Toll box as well, is a Regiment of Renown, right? So there are some cooler ones out there, but some of the others are quite a sizable force that's really going to change. And maybe some people find some great success with some of those. I do think this one is kind of cool, but I wouldn't race to collect all the Regiments of Renown or anything like that. Some people have that completionist vibe. I wouldn't really worry about doing that. It's going to be interesting to see as well if in future, what's quite nice about these is they are all freely available. In future, if for example, in the Soul Black Gravelord's Army book comes out, if that has Regiments of Renown in, the ones that appear in that book won't be fieldable by Soul Black Gravelord players. There'll be different little allied detachments that other people can take. So does that mean people are going to feel the need to buy all of the books for their Grand Alliance so that they've got access to all the Regiments of Renown, right? So if I'm playing Soul Black Gravelords, do I need to then buy the Ossiarch Bone Reapers book, right, in case it has any cool Regiments of Renown that I want to use? And that could potentially suck. Hopefully they can they kind of park Regiments of Renown for now, and when they are looking again to do more campaign books, right, the kind of books that have something in for everyone, that's a place where I could see a few more Regiments of Renown. And indeed, that is where these ones came from, right? Yeah. So just to go through the Regiment of Renown briefly, you can see it tells you exactly what you must take. You have Archon the Black, 1 Morgeist Acharai unit, and 1 Morgeist Harbinger unit, and it even tells you they have to be 2 model units. And then you get some extra stuff that's just for this Regiment of Renown that aren't even rules that are going to be on their data cards in their actual index data file as well. Right. And we're not quite done. There is also a concept called Armies of Renown. So if you want to, you can ignore quite a lot of what I've said here and go, no, instead I'm going to play one of the Armies of Renown from this Dawnbringers Part 1 PDF. And these are, if you played War Machine like Mark 2 and 3, you're familiar with the concept of theme lists. It's basically, here's a list of units from your faction that you can take, and here's the giant ocean of special rules that you're going to get if you restrain yourself to just taking these units. Now, some of these look really cool. For example, there's one for Gloomspite Gitz, which is all trolls, right? Which is, I think Zimbar's trying to do an all-troll Gloomspite Gitz army anyway. He's not actually wanting to use the Regiment of Renown because he doesn't want to take the character and some damn thing. But if he did, he'd get a load of really flavourful rules that were themed around the troll thing, right? But many of them do seem very limiting to me for no real reward. Like, in general, Armies of Renown feel like something that you can pass on and not have to worry about, right? Obviously, if you read through them first, if you're not getting into Age of Sigmar, you might be really inspired by one of them and be like, yeah, I want to do that. But in general, they don't seem that interesting. So there's only one undead Army of Renown that I could find, right? at all for anywhere in the Death Grand Alliance, and that's the Scions of I can't pronounce any of this stuff, right? And so you have to take the new vampire character, the Snake Lady, that came out alongside the book that this was originally in. You can take a Coven Throne, a Bloodseeker Palanquin, Vampire Lords, Direwolves, Fellbats, and you can't have any regiments of renown. So literally that's it, right? So it's saying if you constrain your army to just this stuff, you can get all these special rules here, right? Now, I don't know how I feel about that, right? Because it's very limiting. It's very, very limiting, and it's a very much a skewed list. Now, if you really like vampires, then maybe you want to play this list, but it's not even that straightforward because you can't take, like, Blood Knights, for example. So, yeah, I can't work out who this is for. People that really want to just run loads of Fellbats and Direwolves, maybe. But worth looking at, and it wouldn't have felt right to do a report on how you build an army in Age of Sigmar without including, right, the armies of renown. So that brings us to the end of the video. Let's look at some final thoughts. So, on the one hand, I think this is somewhat complicated because you have to cross-reference a lot of documents. You've got the core rules, you've got the document with the endless spells in, you've got the document with your points costs in, you've got the document with your actual army list in, right? And then you've potentially got regiments of renown and armies of renown. So that's potentially 6 separate PDFs that you're having to cross-reference. Now, on the one hand, it's a really good thing that Games Workshop has released so many rules for free. The start of the edition, which is nice to see. But on the other hand, these PDFs are really poorly optimized. Take a long time to load. I highly recommend, if you have Adobe Reader installed on your computer, downloading them and opening them in Adobe Reader seems to get through them a lot faster than letting them open in your web browser, because most web browsers will handle a PDF file these days, but it absolutely chugs. So I'll go and download the actual app, Adobe Reader, and run them like that. It's going to be a lot easier. It's going to be... Now, having the Games Workshop official app, right, for Age of Sigmar really helps with all of this. You can just, everything's there in the app and you can see what's available to you. And sometimes when you see something, you might be like, oh, which actual book is that in? Because I don't want my opponent, the conversation with your opponent where you go, oh, well, the app let me have this mad thing. And it's like, okay, like, be aware, for example, the Age of Sigmar app has Legends turned on as default, right? So they feel much more part of the game to Age of Sigmar app users, whereas in 40k, there's no Legends. And you can't even hide them in the AOS app either. So it's like the AOS team have just gone off in one direction here, like we want Legends to be far more visible, and the 40k team are like, no, we don't really want that to be a thing, which is another... I'm going to do a proper review of the app because there are some other interesting things with the app. It's so similar to the 40k app that the differences between it and the 40k app are weirdly glaring, and you wonder if they're statements of intent in various ways. So that's going to be interesting. The other thing that's going to be interesting is to see how army books are going to change all this. Are they going to flesh out the formations? Are they going to add more regiments of renown in the army books, which will kind of be annoying? Are they going to add more armies of renown in the army books, which could be cool? Let me know your opinions, right? And I want to acknowledge, I know that I have been neglecting the channel a little bit recently, right? With one thing or another, it's dragged on now for like a month. My life has been conspiring. Like, first there was one thing that I've talked about, and there's another thing that I haven't really talked about, and just different things coming along to make me not feel like making content. And definitely the channel has suffered for that, right? You know, in terms of the views down, shares down, money down, everything down. It's fine. You don't do the thing, you can't expect the thing to be successful. Like, that's very, very basic. So I just want to say a great big thank you to everybody who supports the channel. Even if that's just by subscribing, right, and then staying subscribed and not going, this guy hasn't made a video for a week and a half, I'll unsubscribe. It would really help me if people would stay subscribed. That'd be good. Join the Discord, right, etc. Leave comments, things like that. Big thank you to all those people. If you are new at this first video that you found, I am generally a Kill Team channel, but obviously looking to branch out to other things all the time. So you know, if you subscribe on this video and you comment on this video and you say, yeah, this was great, more AOS stuff, please, that makes more AOS stuff more likely, right? And a big thank you to all my members, who are the people who actually donate me some money every single month, especially to Massive Crit, who is subscribed at the highest possible tier and therefore gets a shout out in every single video. Alright guys, thanks, hope you enjoyed that. I will try and be more on it now in terms of creating content for you guys, and it should get back to how it once was. We got a lot of exciting content coming up, actually. Like, we've got the hobby challenge has got to finish, and the new hobby challenge has got to be taken out. And then I've got tournaments and things that I'm going to, and I'm going to go and play my first game of Shatterpoint next week as well. So all these things, there's loads of things coming up. It's going to be an exciting time, and we're really going to rejuvenate Tablespoon Impulse a little bit. All right, guys, thanks. I'll see you again next time. And if there's any content you particularly like to see, let me know in the comments as well. Cheerio, bye, 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 bye.